Hey, what's up you guys? Bloody Jacob here, bringing my review of the very first Sam Raimi and Tobey Maguire Spider-Man film, Spider-Man, which was released back in 2002. And I just thought, with Spider-Man Homecoming just coming out, and I already did my review on that, I'd go back and review all the previous Spider-Man films, starting with this one, through the Andrew Garfield and Mark Webb films. I'm not promising how quickly I'll get through all of them, but I do plan putting videos on each of them on my channel at some point. Just rewatched it last night. I have the DVD here. Plan on getting all the original movies on Blu-ray at some point. Just trying to save up for a Chicago trip next month. I have the DVD here. And I remember back in 2002, I remember seeing this in theaters. I'm pretty sure I've seen all the original Spider-Man movies in theaters. Let me just say, I honestly consider this movie a classic. It's one of Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2 are one of my two of my all-time favorite comic book films in general. I just think they really set things off for the genre. I know the X-Men movie started before this one, but I do agree that if it wasn't for the success of the Spider-Man movies initially, maybe we wouldn't have gotten MCU to begin with. So the premise is simple. It's kind of a version of the classic origin tale and everything like that. Peter Parker, he's a nerd in high school, gets bitten by a radioactive spider, discovers his powers, but met with tragedy with what happens to his Uncle Ben. And this is before the Uncle Ben thing got repetitive. So like I said, it's Tobey Maguire as Peter Parker and Spider-Man, Cliff Robertson as Uncle Ben. I liked Martin Sheen in the Amazing Spider-Man movie, but I think Cliff Robertson just did a really, really nice and genuine job here. And then, meanwhile, through all that, you also have James Franco, who's an actor I like quite a bit, playing Harry Osborn, Peter's best friend, and sort of building nemesis, as well as Willem Dafoe as, of course, Norman Osborn and the Green Goblin. Willem Dafoe, I should say. He did a really good job in this movie as well. Just playing this, just with the psychotic, break he has after exposing himself to the experiment and everything. He doesn't seem like a bad guy at first. He seems like he has an ego, maybe a little bit, full of greed and maybe a little bit stubborn about the company he's running. But he doesn't seem like a bad guy until he exposes himself to that gas and he snaps and he has these two different sides to himself. So you have that sort of father-son dynamic going on as well, and sort of the jealousy Harry has for Peter because Norman actually admires Peter and his intelligence. And of course you also have J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson, which is such a perfect casting. That's like a character ripped right from the page, right on screen. That's really the definition of it. And like I said, this movie is just a classic. You also have, by the way, Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane, who I ended up not really liking by the third movie and some parts of the second. But here I think she's pretty good. And I don't think, maybe it wasn't her that did a bad job acting-wise. I just think the writing for it gets a little bit frustrating as the series goes. But here it's pretty good. Of course, she's, his, school crush, since, like, kindergarten in the 6th grade or something like that. These movies, initial Spider-Man movies, they do hold a pretty good place in my heart. It sounds a little bit cheesy to say that. And these movies are cheesy as well, to an extent. They're, they just came out at a different time, but also they're very clearly influenced by, some of the 60s Spider-Man stories. So the style of it is sort of meant to be a little bit that way, to a certain extent anyway. And I think it actually works for it here. I really, really like Tobey Maguire in the role. He's arguably still the best in a way. It's hard to say because I feel like these movies, the Amazing Spider-Man movies, and now Tom Holland's version of the character, they all sort of have a different style to them. With Maguire, it's kind of like the classic old school Spider-Man. Garfield Spider-Man, he's a little bit more modern. Kind of a mix of, like the Ultimate version as well. And then the Holland Spider-Man, he's sort of like a combination of both of those. But I think Tobey Maguire just nailed this classic old school, Peter Parker Spider-Man. for some reason he's, some people have already benched him pretty much after Tom Holland's work, and Tom Holland's doing a pretty good job so far. I'm eager to see more of him. But Maguire's just perfect here. He's perfect as this shy, awkward, geeky guy, and some people think it's a little bit too much that way with the way he tries to talk to Mary Jane and stuff. But let me tell you, I've kind of embarrassed myself in similar ways, or I can sort of relate to him. I did find him very relatable in this movie. And I think he's just great with that awkward sort of charm he has, and just the way he talks and everything. I think he did really well with that. And then people also complain about Maguire's Spider-Man, saying, oh, he's not quippy enough, he's too serious, or, he cries too much, yada yada. I kind of disagree with that. He's not like a joke machine. The movie's not like an almost full-on comedy, kind of like Homecoming was. Even though I did like Homecoming, but, I did feel like the humor in that got a little bit much after a while. There's an okay balance. It's not really full of comedy, but Spider-Man does have lines, sprinkled throughout that remind you of, that side of his personality. So I don't think it's non-existent like some people claim it is. And then there's just so much I could talk about with this movie, really. Sam Raimi, he does a great job directing this movie. There's some really, really nice shots, some really memorable shots. Visually, looks really nice as well. Yeah, sure, it's 2002, so there are some moments where you see it's very clearly a CG, Spider-Man, flying through the air or something. But you can't really blame him for that. It did look really good for the time as far as that goes too, and it's still not awful nowadays either. And the Green Goblin's costume, Power Ranger outfit, I would prefer them going as something else too, have it be more like a skin, or not like it was in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, but have it be a little bit more like the classic look, as opposed to the helmet and everything. But I didn't think it was a huge, problem or anything like that. And, something about this movie that I think will forever actually hold over the new Holland films. I know it's a movie about a guy who ends up having the powers of a spider, but these movies, and this one especially, as well as the second at least, all feel more real to me, more believable in a certain way. Just like how the characters are, I can take them more seriously. The fights and the interactions, they feel like they actually have a consequence, and building, repercussions and stuff like that with his relationship with Harry and other things. There's just an intensity to these, and an intensity, especially to that final Green Goblin fight, that I did not feel at all in Homecoming. The final fight is really brutal. They had to change a certain part of it so you wouldn't see too much blood coming out of Peter's mouth at the end, of the fight. Because they want to keep it PG-13, of course. But just the way it's filmed, almost all practically in that scene and stuff, you really feel the hits. Willem Dafoe did about 90% of the stunt work. It feels like a real fight, whereas Homecoming's action, while entertaining, did feel like just a lot of CG or kind of stuff, just flying around and things like that. I don't want to make this a comparison to Homecoming or anything, but I just think for some reason, being older, these movies manage to have a more genuine overall quality to it, I think, and I'm really happy to still say that after watching it last night. The music is also incredible. It's iconic, man. I love it. For some reason I blank out on the composer. Yeah, Danny Elfman. Just a really, really nice job. This is the Spider-Man music I hear when I think of the character. That and the old school Spider-Man. But this one, it's just really good. It has an emotional, inspiring build to it. It really, really helps a lot of the moments resonate. And like I said, as far as the acting goes, it's all pretty good too. Maguire did a great job. I already talked about Willem Dafoe a little bit. Kirsten Dunst, everything feels genuine and emotional while still being, sort of, cheesy to a certain extent, which I think was kind of on purpose. But it all still feels more real to me. I know I'm kind of being repetitive right now, but I talked about Cliff Robertson doing a really nice job as Uncle Ben too, and as well as Rosemary Harris as May Parker. She's the greatest May Parker we're ever gonna get, the greatest Aunt May we're ever gonna get. Marissa Tomei, the new young version of Homecoming, it's okay. But this is like the perfect Aunt May they could have had, based off of the comics. I think she does a wonderful job, and she does really well in the other two movies too. And especially in that scene where she's in the hospital bed, then she overhears Peter talking to MJ, and then they have the conversation about her afterward. It's just some really nice scenes. It feels real, their bond and connection here. Whereas in the new movie, Peter and May, they just feel like just a setup for another joke or something. So. Again, I said I wasn't going to keep comparing it, but, it is what it is. I just loved it all. Then, like I said, I love the final fight, Goblin, giving him the choice. Almost echoing the night Gwen Stacy died, that story, but with Mary Jane here. But he has to choose between, like, I forget what it is, but, like, the thing full of kids and people, or, Mary Jane being dropped. And that whole scene is really intense, too. It feels like it has real consequence here and like a real danger. I just loved it, and then Norman's funeral at the end, after the glider, impaled him, and Peter drops him off there, forever cementing Harry's hatred towards him, or at least Spider-Man. The whole funeral I thought was well handled too, with Peter sort of rejecting MJ at the end, because he sees the danger it puts those he cares about in. It's like a classic, sort of hero, choice, but it just really worked well here. I love that scene. It gets me a little bit emotional too, I'll admit. So yeah, Spider-Man 2002. It was an incredible movie. One of my all-time favorite comic book movies, within my top 5 easily. Probably within my top 3 if I'm being honest. I do like this one slightly more than Spider-Man 2. I know most people prefer 2, but I have a slight preference for this one, although Spider-Man 2 isn't far behind. I'll do my review on that at some point in the next couple weeks, I'm sure, and then Spider-Man 3 eventually, and so on and so forth. But yeah, I just loved it, and if I had to rate this, I'd rate Spider-Man about an A or A+, honestly. I think it was that good, still to this day. I just have a very hard time finding any real flaws with it that actually, matter. I can't think of any, honestly, right now off the top of my head. I also love the Spider-Man suit. I think it looks pretty good as well. But yeah, so let me guys think about this one at this point. How would you compare it to Homecoming? Even though it shouldn't be all about that, I just enjoy that we have quite a few good versions of the character out there now. Yeah, follow me on Facebook, Twitter, subscribe. I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.